Welcome, everybody. Give us just a minute to get some things shared here, and we will be getting started.
There we are.
Yay, I'm getting to my questions here and my bio. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on the Theta Healing Power Hour. And what we are doing this time around, right, is we are talking about the shifts that we can make, like in homeschooling and educating our children at home and parenting and wearing all the hats that we wear doing this. And my featured guest is Miss Judy Sarden.
Hi, still trying to figure out how to share.
So I'm killing some time. I'm going to give you a bio while she's doing that. And so let me tell you a little bit about Judy. So Judy is the author of Sarden's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. So this hosts Ivy League Road. It's formerly the How to Homeschool podcast, and
Yes.
it speaks nationally on home education and general education topics. And just so y'all know, Judy did this before coronavirus and COVID-19. Okay.
Yes.
So it was like one of those God things where it's like, oh, here's, she's already got this in place to help us. Now she is a corporate attorney and has been for over 20 years. She has homeschooled her 2 children for 8 years. So I think if you do it for just a month, you're an expert, but Judy's doing it for 8 years. So she brings her corporate and her legal strategy skills to families by helping them to strategically plan their children's academic and extracurricular career to position them for college admissions, success, and beyond. So understanding that the world where our children will raise their families is very different from that of our forefathers, to say the least. Judy helps usher children into the education of the future. So, and that, I mean, like, drop the mic, this is Miss, right? So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, I've known Judy for a couple of months. And when she was talking about what she was doing, I was like, oh, wow, that's so needed. And then when we went into quarantine and kids weren't going to school, I was like, well, and this is what I say, guys. Yes, some people are suffering hardships at this time, and other people are positioning themselves, and some, like Judy, not on purpose, right? Like purposely doing what she loves and what she wants to do, what she feels like is important. And it's so relevant at this time. So we're just so blessed to be able to have her and get some information from her, right? And so I'm gonna like get on my phone and see, you know, say hi to y'all. But we just want to ask her some questions, right? So, and if you have any other questions, just drop them down below, you know, and I will do my best. Just know that, you know, I'm doing it all here, right? So we'll see what I can do, and if not, we'll catch up to you, right? So
Yes,
if we miss the question that you have or the support that you need. Now, Judy, do you have a group?
I do.
Okay.
I actually do, and hopefully I clicked the right share button and sent this to the group. But the name of the group is How to Homeschool. There's a page How to Homeschool, and there's a group How to Homeschool. The group.
So, and when we get off, we'll have her drop that in the.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the comments
so that you guys will be able to get it as well. Because you know, right? Who would have known that this is what would be a hot topic right now?
Right.
So, so Judy, tell me, like, how did 8 years? How did you get started homeschooling your kids?
Well, yeah, you know, I was working in corporate America and just plugging along, and I had my 2 babies, and I was looking at private schools to enroll them in, and just kind of a series of events, you know, with the private Montessori school that they were going to just started to not work out for my oldest child. And it was, you know, one of those, anyone who's a mother of boys will probably recognize this. every time you go, it's the little boy was moving around too much. He didn't want to sit still during circle time. It's just boys are active and they want to move around. And even in a Montessori school, apparently that was a problem. And so as I started kind of extrapolating, where we were going with this, as far as going to a public school or even another private school, as he joined elementary, I could see that this was going to be kind of a recurring
Challenge.
mantra. And so I said, I looked and looked and I was like, well, you know what? He's going to kindergarten. I don't have a teaching degree, but he's, how bad can I mess up kindergarten, right? So if I just totally screw it up, I can always send him back to school in first grade. So
Well, you save some money and you can send him to therapy. There you go.
Hey, you're right. I figure everyone's going, both of my kids will have plenty to give a therapist at some point in my life. So I'm not worried about that. I'm kind of beyond that. I accept it.
Yeah.
But they'll be going to healers like you to work through some of the things I did, but that's okay. But yeah, so I'm like, how bad can it be? So I just took it 1 year at a time. So the first year I left my corporate job and started doing contract work at home and started homeschooling my kindergartner, and I had my 3-year-old at home with me. And, literally I just fell into it. It wasn't something that I had ever planned to do ever in life. Because up until then, my idea of what a homeschooler looked like didn't look like me. So, and so it's just, so that's how I got into it. And every year and this is what I recommend to people, just take it 1 year at a time. Every year I looked at it, I kind of assessed where we were, and I said, okay, we're going to do it again this year. Yeah, looks like we are. And so that's what I've done. And now I've done it for 8 years and we're about to move into year 9.
Wow. And what grades are they in now?
They're 5th and 7th. So they'll be moving into 7th. No, they'll be moving into 6th and 6th and 8th.
See, guys, you don't have to be able to count to be able to homeschool. There you go. I didn't mean it wasn't algebra or anything here. I didn't mean to put her on the spot, but we're all like, hey, listen, right now I know like days and times and everything all together. So,
yes,
we're just all doing. So how long did it take for you to feel confident, or are you, or do you yet?
That's such a good question, because part of the reason why I started coaching and consulting with people is because typically when you first start homeschooling, there are so many options, and the options are vast. You never even believe all the options where there are. And I spent a lot of money just randomly choosing stuff, and it's totally the wrong thing and having to redo things. But I spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what worked for my kid and what didn't, and why. I mean, sometimes it doesn't just not work for your kid, it doesn't work for you. I have to do math like old school math. So nothing that looks like new math is going to be implemented in my house. And it took me 3 tries to figure that out. So I now have a math program that just has standard algorithm math. So it took Brenda 3 good years for me to feel like I really knew what I was doing. Now, every year, there are different challenges. We're in middle school now, and we have all kinds of challenges now, and but it's more so around managing.
More hormonal, but go on.
Yes, managing the middle schooler, and so. But it took me 3 good years. But every year, and it's really normal to second guess yourself. I
think that's part of being a parent, but go on.
Yes. Right. And it is, because you always feel like, you might be missing something, you might be dropping the ball. And a lot of times that fear holds people back from starting homeschooling, and it makes people stop homeschooling. And so hopefully you can help us kind of work through some of that today.
Well, it was really interesting, Judy. My best friend, we've been friends for like 20 something years, right? They relocated like from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, and they were waiting for their home to become available. So they were living temporarily. So at that time, I think my friend's children were like 4 and 6, you know, or 3 and 5 or something like that. And so, you know, of course, she wanted to make sure that they weren't, you know, getting behind.
Right.
And so the one thing, and this was only for 4 weeks, right? Like this wasn't like an extended period of time. But the thing that she said to me was, because before, again, you know, like Judy, like full-time job, you know, she was actually an entrepreneur and she had this full-time gig. She was a photographer. And she said that month was so helpful because she learned that her boys learned differently.
Yes.
And it helped her to understand that. She didn't know it until that point. Of course, they were very young, you know, but that's helpful, right? And so for most of us, we don't realize that that's going on.
Yes.
And I feel like that's why some parents, you know, before all of this happened, right? Like some of us, this did not happen by choice, right? But for some people, I think that's why they choose, like what Judy was saying, is because they're realizing that their children learn differently, you know. And for us, it was like, suck it up, buttercup, and you know,
that's right.
you know, too bad, so sad. And then you made like bad grades, and again, then you saw like a therapist after you got out of school or something because you thought you were stupid, right? But but you know, but now we know so much more, right? We know so much more. And so is it hard, Judy, to do homeschooling?
You know, it can be. And I'm always really, really honest with people about that. And actually, I just dropped, hopefully it went through, an episode today on my podcast with Barbara D'Antonio Phillips. She's very, very open and honest about, you know, you have days when you behave and say things that you would never, ever want anybody outside of your house to hear or see. You do have those days. And so, but one of the points that Barbara made was, that's very raw, and that it's okay for your kids to see that, and you work through it, and it helps to strengthen your bond. You know, when you're schooling your kids and you're with them a lot, it helps you to look inside of yourself and see what's in there and maybe make some changes. You know, you can model dealing with adversity. You can really model so much on how you deal with things to your kids. And so it can be really, really hard. You know, you have days when, you know, these people won't get out of my space. Even though they're as old as they are, I still can't go to the bathroom without a visit. You know, it drives me crazy because I'm an introvert and I really need that recharge time, and so I have to make the time. So I get up before everybody does. Now that my husband's home, I really have to get up early.
I mean, right. Quarantine puts a whole nother spin on it.
It
right?
really has, but it can be hard. But at the same time, I wouldn't exchange it for anything because I know my children so well. You know, they come to me, they talk to me. My middle schooler talks to me about all kinds of his private growing up stuff that I know would probably never happen if you were in school. And I like being the first person, at least. Who knows what they talk about when he's playing baseball or doing whatever he does with his friends, but I like it that I'm the first person I get the first say on all the body stuff, you know. I like that we have a relationship. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. They're around me all the time, which can drive you crazy, but it's also kind of cool, you know, knowing that I have that relationship with the children. So yeah, it can be really hard. You know, there are days when, I mean, yesterday we were doing multivariate equations. I know how to do it, but doing it with, you know, a 7th grader wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, who am I going to get to teach this boy math next year? Because it's not going to be me, you know? So you just figure out how to get things done. But, you know, I wouldn't exchange it for anything.
Well, you know, I think that the quarantine has done one of two things for people. I think it's made them like really appreciate teachers in the school system. and, like going to kiss their feet when they see them in the fall type thing. And I think for some other people, it's made them realize, like, I think this is what I want to be doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to, and that's where Judy steps in, right? Because I feel like that whenever we talk to somebody who's been there, done that, and then has decided to share their genius, that they have discovered, right? That they are creating, it cuts down. There's, something to be said to cut down on, the research, knowing what
Yes.
works, what doesn't work.
Yes.
I mean, you can either let your children be the experiment, or you can, benefit from Judy, right? And, and that's the thing. It's like, when we were kids, and I think Judy's a little younger than me, but when we were kids, homeschooling was for the, kids that couldn't make it in school.
Yes.
Right. And there was nothing else for them to do. Like, my sister and I'll just say, we went to school for the whole social aspect of it.
Yes.
And the homeschoolers were kids who didn't have the social activities, and
right.
It's so different now, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's like, I think that would have been my fear, like 20 years ago, was
right.
like, how am I, like right now, I'm going to tell you, I sucked at socializing my dog. I'll just say that, right? But, and I'm doing much better with my cat, but it's like, how do you do this with your children? And I think there's a lot more out there for people. Plus right now it's kind of cool, like that some curriculum is just available for free online.
Yes.
Culturally, and I mean, so in so many different aspects.
Yes.
Weren't available. And I think it's probably will continue on. I mean, I don't think they're just going to like pull it.
Oh no, I think
quarantine's over, right? And
it's, there's so much you can do. And to your point about socialization, I want everybody to know, if you're being forced to homeschool your kids right now during the pandemic, this is pandemic schooling. And I tell everybody this who I talk to right now, it's very different from homeschooling, when you've actually planned it and you've actually, put thought into it. This is very different from actual homeschooling. Even as a veteran homeschooler, this pandemic schooling has been difficult because of the lack of social. Because we're out of our house every single day. My kids have sports practice. My kids have, neighborhood friends. They have homeschooling friends. They have homeschooling park dates. We could literally be out of this house every single day during the day, meeting with homeschool friends, going to museums for homeschool days, every single day. And so it's been difficult for us too, not being able to go anywhere. So this is not homeschooling, folks. This is pandemic schooling. So I just want people to know that.
And so, but Judy, you can also help them with that as well, correct? And you can support them in that too, right?
Absolutely, because, we are, we're surviving, and different, there are different ways that you can manage the situation, and, kind of doing the ebb and flow. I mean, every state is different. Obviously, I live in Georgia. We're open. So my son has a baseball game Saturday. So we are open, but I know that different people have different levels of comfort, even in this open state. And so, yes, we can absolutely work with wherever you are personally, and wherever your state is, as we get moving back into normal.
Well, and Judy can also make recommendations,
yes.
Right? Because she's done some research on this new math thing for next year, like on the things, the levels, and if you're needing some help, right? I think as a parent, and especially, and not for everyone, and so I don't mean anything by it, but I think it falls a lot on the woman's shoulders, in order to homeschool. So, and again, as females, we want to be everything for everyone.
Right.
And
right.
So, therein lies the challenge, right? We know that there were subjects we were better at
yes.
than others. And we know like that either we need to, get a tutor, pass this on to somebody so that your children can have that support. And, I think, and in fact, she's actually on Margarita is watching. And I think that Margarita's, she's also a friend of ours. And I love what she's doing. I think her daughter's 11.
Yeah, same age as mine.
And so she wanted to get something that involved the whole family and involved her daughter. And they're selling, baked goods, cookies online, like, and not just like, I mean, like cookies, like, yes. Oh my gosh, like
it's amazing.
1,000-calorie cookies, I think, in one cookie. But they look amazing, but it's been, she's like having to switch, like to put one of her businesses on hold in order to be able to support this, because it's just taken off. And so here her children and her daughter's her eldest, I believe, or close to it. And
she has one older.
Yeah, they're learning all these aspects of entrepreneurism. And I think that that's amazing. And I think that those are things that are available more during the pandemic, as well as homeschooling.
Yes.
For kids.
Yes.
And their parents. And, this is really good, right? Because not everybody's going to go to college.
Right.
Not everybody. And also when you know who your children are and you're, looking at their strengths, to support those, right? And help them with their weaknesses, right? Because we all have them, and support that. It ends up being just a really, win-win. So, she's making some money, and they're, that's amazing. I mean, the only way that I had it when I was a kid was being a Girl Scout and selling cookies.
Selling someone else's stuff.
Right, exactly. So this allows people, allows kids to be able to do this. And, I work with kids. I'm just going to say that right now. I know that people probably think like I only work with entrepreneurs and I only work with that's what I love. But sometimes as parents, we know like we need help. And, and I can't tell you how many times I've had parents contact me to work with their 10-year-old, to work with their, and they're like, schedule a session. The kids will go back to school. The principal will come up to them and go, "Oh my God, whatever y'all did over the weekend. And thank you so much for being such good parents and addressing this." And like, literally I had one woman go, "Oh, I didn't just schedule a session with Brenda," because, we just change things up. And sometimes, and I think it is different, again, when you're doing the pandemic or the homeschooling. Sometimes it was really funny. I actually had a session one time, and the child was really having some challenges. And it was just that they were, again, not saying, but they were not a fit with the teacher that they had. And so I finally just, we had a session, and then at the end I said, "So is it that we're just really challenged with the teacher that we have right now?" And it was like, "Yes." And then so I brought the parent in and I said, "So what's going on?" Again, we did some work, but what's going on is, and it never occurred to her to ask them that. Like, she was making it about herself. She was making it about like everything else. And it was like this super simple answer. Right. And again, and it wasn't like that it was a bad teacher or anything. It just, we don't fit with everybody. Like I was, I teach theta healing, and now, and I'm a theta healing practitioner, but I'm not the practitioner for everyone. Right. And I know that. Right. And I'm not the instructor for everyone. I mean, that's the deal. So it's just really, it's good for us to be aware of these things. And then sometimes it's nice to have an objective party like Judy that can show us like what needs to happen. And you offer some support with that as well, right, Judy? When people are looking at your programs and looking at different things.
Yes.
Valuable.
So what I do is I can support a family who wants to do it themselves. And so I can be there as a support to help guide them through all the things, because most people think that homeschooling is just choosing a curriculum. And that's probably one of about 10 things that you really need to do and have in place. And then even there are about 4 or 5 things you need to even think through and have kind of settled before you even start jumping in and choosing the curriculum. And so that's kind of one of those things that I learned the hard way. So I can help support people who are willing to do it themselves. And then I also can support people who don't want to do the research themselves, and just, work with them, look at personality tests, look at learning styles of their children, and put together a plan for them, kind of a done for you that mom or dad can do, a nanny can do, or a tutor can implement. So yeah, so I have,
Well,
I
and I
support both
think
of
that
those.
this is the thing too, right? Yes, you can Google some of this stuff, but the research and the hit or miss and
Spend
the,
hours
and
and
every,
days.
right. Like,
Yeah.
and then you're teaching your children, right? Then you can just have like this, like all the answers here, or somebody who will help you with those answers, that kind of thing. And I think that that's so important for any of us and anything that we do. It is invaluable to be able to hire somebody that is an expert, which
Mhm.
Judy may, be go like, I don't know if I'm an expert, but yeah, you are. 8 years, you're an expert, right? And when we're looking at, again, it's getting support in the way that we need it. And
Mhm.
that's how I feel like with Theta Healing, right? So, it's the Theta Healing Power Hour, and we're just so happy that y'all are here. And what's so cool is, when I was, I always ask any of my featured guests, like, what are the challenges that your clients are facing right now? And so, what I loved about bringing Judy on, right, we're getting some information, and please share this,
Mhm.
on your timeline, tag people who are at home teaching
Yes.
their children, who
Yeah.
are, curious about homeschooling, who are curious just about, I was just talking to a parent, and she was just like, her kids they're in kindergarten, right?
Mhm.
And so she was like saying, well, I said, every teacher knows that in the fall, right? If you choose not to homeschool or continue this, and Judy can make it easier for you,
Yes.
they all know that they're going to be catching the kids up, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's just the thing. And maybe even a little bit of homeschooling as well, because of having to deal with this unusual circumstance that we're
Yes.
going through in the pandemic and in the quarantine. And, it's so funny because she was like saying, well, they say that, like the children of Katrina were, never really, got up to par. And I was just like,
Wow.
okay, the children of Katrina are not the same as the children of the pandemic, right? I mean, that's two completely different situations here.
Yeah.
Yes, I know it's a little traumatizing. And again, you can Google a lot of stuff that'll tell you how to deal with the pandemic and explain it to your children, right? But this is the thing that, people these people got, had to relocate to different
Yes. They lost
states.
everything.
And churches had to help them out because our government, again, I don't want to get all political, but our government wasn't stepping up to help the people of Katrina. And so, or quick enough in what was needing to happen, because it was devastating what happened there. And of course, we're seeing in other areas that this is happening that's
Mhm.
similar, but that's not what's happening in this day-to-day life. It may feel a little traumatizing to the parents and having to do this at home. So we may have to like go around that, right? And I have a friend who says, like, if you want to know what you still need to work on, get in a relationship, right? And I often say, like, if you want to know what you need to work on, start a business.
Oh gosh.
But I'm thinking that Judy would probably say, if you want to know what you need to work on, homeschool your children or teach
Oh
them
gosh.
during the
Yes.
pandemic, right? Because
Yes.
it points out to us. And again, I think probably one of the most difficult things that we see is ourselves, of what we don't like about ourselves in our children,
Oh
right?
yeah.
That they've
Oh yeah.
inherited that, and we've modeled that for them.
Oh yeah. My oldest son is exactly, well, my oldest child is exactly the way I was when I was his age. And yeah. So I've
Which is where
changed.
I can come into place and help you with that. Just saying. And again, we love it when they have the great, I actually, speaking of my friend who I was just talking about, like learning, it's like I called her the other day because now she's like down on half days where she works. So she's at home, and I called her, and she's like, oh no, sir, not the attitude. No, you get back to that lesson. And I said to her, oh, is your mini me some lip? And
Yeah.
she's like, uh-huh, and so, because I knew he could hear me, so I didn't want him to hear me, but I know, that's what's going on, and we're just,
Totally.
we're all just, this is the deal, right? We know that we made it out okay, and so will your children, because you love them, or you wouldn't be watching this, or you wouldn't be concerned about this,
That you just said a mouthful, sister, because that's what I tell people. Like no matter how angry I get, no matter, what I say or yell or whatever, literally 10 minutes later, we could be snuggled up on the couch doing a read aloud. And because nobody loves these children more than their mama. Their dad would probably disagree. But and nobody wants to see them succeed more than my husband and myself. So
should just throw him in there first, just in case he watches.
Better throw him in there. Yeah, I know he's in the house somewhere. So exactly, but truly, nobody wants them to succeed more than I do, more than we do. I should say I, because I'm the one who does the schooling. That's just not his thing. But so I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that they succeed. And I honestly, and I don't know, maybe it's just my lawyerly arrogance, but I honestly believe that my kids, I can give my kids as good, if not a better education than the government could provide, for sure.
And this is the thing, we're not talking about teachers here, right? Like,
Right,
I have
not
the
at all.
greatest respect for teachers. It's
Yep.
about the support that they get. And again, we don't want to go off on a tangent here. So I'm not saying like school, public school bad, homeschooling good. We're just, again, we want to be able to have options. And we want to be able to have options while we're in unusual circumstances. And we want to, and I think that that's, again, we're having these opportunities that allow us
Mhm.
to know our children better and know
Mhm.
ourselves better,
Mhm.
right? And so that just is a win-win. It may not feel very good in the moment, but it's a win-win in the long run. And I think, as I say, if we can change some beliefs, if we can keep our eye on what the intention is and our eye on the prize, so to speak, we're going to see that in the long run. Not that, like I wish that we have a pandemic so that we can learn lessons. Absolutely not. But I think that there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this.
Mhm. I agree.
If we're able to reframe it, if we're able to restructure it, if we're able to stay objective. And with theta healing, that's the one big thing that I always say is that when we do this work at a cellular level, which is what theta healing does, it allows us to be in that state of neutrality. It allows us to be non-reactive. And not because we're thinking about it 24/7, because it's who we are and it's how we become. And it allows us to be objective and neutral. And that's so important in any aspect of our lives, but it's super important as we are, going through this and going through this with our family and our children and our spouses, right? So when we look at theta healing, people can tell us how they think and how they feel, but what we create in our lives is what we believe. And as I said, I was actually on a panel last night and all of us were talking about the same thing. We were just all talking about different roads.
Mhm.
I just happened, after, 13 different integrative healing certifications and just working on myself for like 29 years, I'm one of those that wants the quickest, easiest, permanent way. And that's what I found with theta healing, which is why I do it for a living. And it's also, if you had told me 15 years ago, like that I'd be doing this for a living, I'd have been like, what? Just like I'm sure that Judy would have been like,
Yes, yeah.
I'd be homeschooling and I'd be a
Absolutely.
homeschooling expert, right?
No.
So, again,
Nobody saw that coming. I used to drive a little white Mercedes coupe with a license plate that said shark. So yeah, nobody saw this coming. Not even me.
But this is, times change, kids change us,
Yes.
all of that, right? So, so that's a beautiful thing. And when we can get that support and help, and I'm going to tell you, I've worked with like infants all through all ages and sometimes teenagers. I actually have a divorced father who his youngest was a girl, right? He had 2 boys and he sends all of them when they hit high school, he sends them to my classes. Because this is a great tool for them to have, right? I love teaching kids. We all kind of sit like they teach us, right? I bring them in my class and, they teach us. So, what's so interesting is that like about every 6 months to a year over like the last 5 years, he sets a session with me,
Oh, that's nice.
because there are just some things that she doesn't know how to say it to her dad, and she doesn't
Mhm.
have that kind of relationship with her mom. And so we changed some things, and then we're able to bring him in again. It's never like separate. When somebody has a session with me, it's like complete anonymity, but when it's your child,
Sure.
the parents involved at the end, right? So where, we can
Sure.
all be like comfortable with what's being said. And sometimes it's just nice to have that neutral party. It's kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah. So it's great, right? And the cool thing is that these changes are permanent with Theta Healing. We change it like with beliefs that we've inherited, with ones that we've just brought into us when we were born, what we carry around in our soul, and what we've created here in this lifetime, the experiences that we've had. And that's what makes it permanent. And so when somebody, the big deal is that you just have to say yes, right? Out loud, right? Because when we say yes out loud, it tells our brain, it tells, whoever we believe to be our higher power, it tells the universe. And then as we say, it's that conspiracy to make it all happen for us. And it makes it really cool. And again, we just want it, that's what I love about it, is I just want to make it easier for people and be supportive of them. So there's a lot of science behind this. I covered that actually in the first video that I had with Alyssa Rushton, because she was very heady and knew about like the science of it and was just sharing it all. And again, this is a great technique. Like I say, I have a lot of kids who come to my classes, but
Mhm.
also I actually decided to become an instructor of this because I thought that every parent in the world ought to know it, to be honest. Because again, we want to change, because the world is our mirror. And guess what? Our family and our kids and our spouses and our partners, they're the biggest mirrors. And so
Yeah.
I always say, like, whenever, like when we were out like networking and we could meet with people, I'd always have women that would like pull me aside and go, my husband needs to have a session with you. I always went, well, what about you? And I would say, you know what? The world is our mirror. And I promise you, if you have a session with me, either one, he will decide to have one soon after, or two, you won't need it because he gets to be different because you're different, right? Because people are just following our dances.
Mhm.
And I always say that we just show our buttons to the ones we love, and they push them because they love us. So when we remove some of those buttons, then they don't feel compelled to do it, right? So Judy's going to tell us like what people like, where the challenges are, right? So we're going to pick two. We may go with more. But the big thing is that I want to make sure that we get 3 beliefs in place before we get started. The 3 that I always change for a new client or a new student is: I want an instant healing, I deserve an instant healing, and an instant healing is possible. And the reason that I change those is because what we're doing is instantaneous. But if you don't have those beliefs, guess what? It makes it harder. Okay.
Mhm.
So I want an instant healing, I deserve an instant healing, and instant healing is possible. So if you'd like those, so whether you're watching it live or somebody is sharing it or tagging you for a replay, all you have to do, again, if you're in a public place, you don't have to scream it or anything. You just have to say yes, but all you have to do is just say yes. So would you like those? How about you,
Yeah.
Judy? Would you like those?
Yes.
So what we're doing in this moment is we're bypassing the conscious and subconscious mind, because our brain actually limits us when we're doing something like this. So we can put it in our brain like, I need to, be happy, or I need to accept things to, change quickly. But easier said than done. And so when we can bypass the brain, we change it cellularly, then our brain and emotions follow, which makes it just so much easier, right? So now we get to the juicy part, right? So what do you feel like, Judy? So what do you feel like are the biggest things that are holding people back from homeschooling their children, even though they think it's the best thing? Or what do you feel like their challenges are at this
I can
moment?
tell you the 2 things I've been hearing year after year after year at all the conventions that I go to, and messages that I get. There are 2. One, I'm not smart enough to homeschool my kids. And the second one is, I don't think I can be with my kid all day.
So the first thing that we got to do, right, is forgive ourselves for not being smart enough, right? Forgive ourselves for feeling like we're not smart enough. We're smart enough. Although there is that, show out, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? But, right. So, and again, we have all the support materials, people like Judy that can support us in this, but we are smart enough. Because I think at times that we're so in awe of how brilliant our children are. Mm. Well, they got it from somebody, folks. They didn't just fall, they didn't just come out of a Cabbage Patch and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, where did they get this from? Right. And so we have to, one, forgive ourselves for feeling like that. And we need to forgive whoever possibly told us that, right? Because it's not just us, right? Like, again, it's not just a thought that randomly came out of. So we either had one of our parents, we've either had a teacher, a boss, a neighbor, a family member, right? That led us, that said something, and we either turned it around and made it what it wasn't, right? Because that's what we do sometimes. Yeah. Or we misunderstood it, or it was out of context, or, we just kind of, we're being human in this moment. So we just want to forgive ourselves. We want to forgive God for creating that situation. We want to forgive, or whoever you believe to be your higher power. We also want to forgive, like, whoever the players were, right? Like, whoever was involved in this. We want to forgive ourselves. We also, often say so much of the stuff that we have that occurs in our lives comes from trauma. And it's all relative, right? So it can be something that, we feel like, somehow, a car accident, that's trauma, right? An act of war, that's trauma. Being physically or accosted, that's trauma, but it can be anything. I often say, like, your mom being, 5 minutes late picking you up from preschool. If that felt traumatic to you, guess what? It's trauma. There's no judgment on it, right? So what I like to do is remove, like, because maybe we know what happened in this lifetime and maybe we don't, right? And that's the cool thing. It doesn't matter with Theta Healing. We're going to be able to help it no matter what, right? So we want to, we say with Theta Healing, we remove the free-floating memories. Because when we have a trauma, we have these free-floating memories, and then we pack our bags and we just carry them around with us, and it does one of two things. It either attracts more of the same type of trauma, so we relive it, or we project it onto something that doesn't sound, smell, or taste like it, and we relive it. So we want to get rid of the free-floating memories of that trauma so that we don't have to relive it, so that it can be complete. And we do that at 4 levels. Like I said, what we inherit, what we've brought in, what we've experienced, what we have in our soul. So we want to remove the free-floating memories, right? We want to change, we want to shift why we don't feel smart enough, right? Because it's not just about our kids. I mean, I promise you, the kids are just like, this situation is like bringing it out for us, but it was there before that. It didn't just all of a sudden happen. It didn't, like, I have to, like, pandemic school and all of a sudden I'm not smart, right? It was there to begin with. So we want to shift that from, if there was something in this lifetime that happened or whatever happened, in order for it to be occurring now. So if you would like that, just say yes out loud. Yep. Yes. And we want to be able to know, right? Like, there is, or there hasn't been, there is now, right? But it's like you become a parent and you don't do any schooling for that, right? And then all of a sudden you are doing pandemic schooling, and there is, but we're flying by the seat of our pants here, folks.
Yep.
Doing this, and handling how it is. And again, this is all new for us. Yep. So everyone's just doing the best that we can.
Yes.
So we have to
People have to
forgive
forgive
ourselves.
themselves
Right. So
for
we have
whatever
to,
they think.
yeah. So we have to change like
Yes.
that you're going to do it perfect.
Yes.
We have to forgive ourselves for making mistakes with our children. And we have to change the fact that one thing that we do is going to ruin our kids for life. Right?
Yes.
They're resilient,
Yeah.
they're resilient. And again, yes, there are horrific things that can happen that are a trajectory for that. But I promise you, being in quarantine with you, hopefully is not one of them, right? It's like we're all going to be okay. And I think we're all going to be better for it. Again, not that we wanted to call this in for that to be the result, but that's it. So we want to forgive ourselves when we've made mistakes in schooling or parenting with our children.
Mm-hmm.
We have to come from that place of being, let's see, somebody saying, I will answer that, right? Because this has to kind of do, but, and we also want to stop. So the question is, so I'm going to do a little work, but I'm going to go ahead and piggyback into it is, what is your thought regarding children growing up in abusive environments regarding the mirror concept? This is the deal. That abuse gets held on a cellular level, and then unfortunately, we're a magnet for it. So we want to go ahead, let's heal that. So let's heal it as adults so that we don't have to pass it on to our children, right? Let's shift what obligates, and obligates means no choice, in doing the things that didn't sit well with us or weren't for our highest and best, so that we can stop that pattern and not pass it on to our children. And let's also shift that it's possible for us to create environments that are different or better than what we grew up in as children, if that's what's needed to happen. So let's also change that obligation to repeat the same mistakes and patterns of our childhoods with our children. So if you'd like those, just say yes out loud.
Yes.
I think what happens for a parent sometimes, and I've seen it, is that they have this tremendous amount of guilt, and then they allow that to parent their children instead of just giving themselves a break and stop trying to make up for a mistake that they made, or that type of thing, because it doesn't serve the child to be able to take advantage of the parent. Just saying. And I see it a lot, right? And so it's like that thing where, so what I want to do is, again, for us to forgive ourselves when we've done those, right? When we've made those mistakes. And we also want to be able to have that discernment between just letting it go and saying, I made a mistake, and doing it differently. Because it's just as valuable for our children to know that we're not perfect.
Yes.
And that we know when to apologize.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So we have to forgive ourselves when we didn't and we needed to. And then we have to be able to have that discernment, because again, we want to remove, we want to shift that we're obligated to go from one extreme to the other, because it's in the gray, right? That the beauty is that we can be in that neutrality and show up in the best way we can for ourselves as well as for our families. So if you'd like that, just say yes out loud.
Yes.
And, all we can do is hold space and know that we can make this world a better place by looking at ourselves, and know that if there are situations that need our help outside of who we are, that we can either contribute to it financially or volunteer or however that is. Because again, not everybody gets to, grow up in situations where the parents are concerned. The biggest concern is, am I good enough to teach my children? Really? Like, if that's, I one time went to an animal communicator, and, I was in like this room of like all these people with all these rescue animals, and, the animal communicators telling them all, we showed a picture, and my dog's deal was that she liked the color of her old bed better than her new bed. That's like the message that I got from the animal communicator. Right. So this is kind of the situation here as well. If the biggest concern is that whether or not I'm teaching my children as best they can, guess what? They're blessed to have you. They're very blessed. And so to know that, right, that if you're showing up, if you're watching this, if you're saying yes, what a blessing you are for your children. And if you feel like that there are some ways that you need some help with curriculum, with support in pandemic schooling, or looking into homeschooling, Judy's going to tell you how to be able to get a hold. If you just need some help because maybe this has been a little traumatizing to you and you feel like that you need some support outside of that has nothing to do with curriculum, I'm here for you, right? So Judy, how can people get a hold of you after this? So again, tell us what your group is again.
Sure. My Facebook group is How to Homeschool. It's the group, not the page. Also,
we'll put the link below, just so you know.
Yes, we'll put it below. And then my Facebook page is Judy Sarden Speaker. My website's just my name, judysarden.com.
And you also have a podcast as well.
Yes, I have a podcast. It was formerly the How to Homeschool podcast. It is now Ivy League Road. So I don't know what it's listed at right now because I literally just changed it today. So I'm not sure if I did it right, but yeah, so I will put
you've got both of them to be able to,
I'll put the link below once I find out where it is.
So again, you know how to find it, how to look for it. And again, it's allowing us to be able to know that we're giving our children the best opportunities that they can. If you choose to homeschool your children after we're done with the pandemic and the quarantine. I'm not going to say we're going to be done with the pandemic, but after we're done with the quarantine, right? And hopefully, God willing, that's all I will say, our children who are going beyond homeschooling, who are going to be going back to public school or private school outside of the home, that, we're going to be okay. And again, there's so many resources. Judy is a great one, right? If you're needing a little extra support, like as far as, like Judy says, she gets up early, right, to have her time for herself type thing. I do have like a 1-minute meditation that I offer to people to be able to support them. So if you'd like that, just message me. Like, I often tell people also, if you have any questions, need some extra support, want to know a little bit about Theta healing, I've got a class coming up. If you'd like to be able to take that, or if you want to send your child to it, right? I do need for them to be just a teeny bit older if they're not going to be in the class with you. But, hey, it's a great tool for them to have. I literally, the gal that I was talking about, who, dad would have her meet with me. She actually took the classes, and then she has gone to college. Well, and I guess is attending virtually now. But she was like saying like how she uses these tools like in studying and with everything else. And the adults in the class were just fascinated by it, because of course we didn't think about that kind of stuff. But of course she's younger and more brilliant than us, and so she could. So, there are so many opportunities available. I will be, in the comments, I will put like how to be able to get in touch with me if you want to schedule. Judy will also have that available as well. If you, or you can just message either of us through Facebook.
Yes. Yeah, messaging me through Facebook is the quickest way.
And, you know, sometimes spam kind of throws it off, but we try to be aware of that, or whatever they call it through Messenger. Or you go on her website and you can contact her through there, Judy Sarden, you know, .com. So there are a lot of ways to be able to get a hold of us. There are a lot of ways to be able to get support. Please tag anybody that you feel like that they need to hear this. Share it on your timeline and tag people. We just want to be able to know that there's support for people and that they can, you know. And next week, I'm going to be interviewing Carrie Brzezowski, and she actually works in the healthcare field. So we're going to be looking at supporting our healthcare workers.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, again, we're trying to hit all the places to be able to hit, and just day to day, but also what's happening now through the pandemic. Is there anything else, Judy, that we need to know? I'm going to look and see.
No,
If there's any
just
questions or anything.
you know, I know that a lot of people need support. I can work with you for a year. I can work with you just for a few months. You know, there are various things because different people need different things, and I know that.
Just like our kids.
Yeah, and right now there's so much uncertainty around what schools are going to look like in the fall. I know that several people who I've spoken with don't want to send their kids back just because until there's a vaccine, they don't want to send their kids back. They don't want to send their kids back and they're having to wear masks and gloves all day. They don't want their kids to have, you know, lunches where they can't talk to anybody. And they don't want their kids to feel isolated, which, you know, some of the descriptions of what they're talking about sound kind of draconian. I mean, honestly. And so there are a lot of people who are thinking not long term, but at least maybe for the next year only.
Temporarily, right.
To keep
and then you'll end up being like Judy, where 8 years later,
right.
Going, well, this kind of started off as a temp gig and here you go.
Yeah. So, you know, there are a lot of people in that situation. And, you know, understandably so. So if that's you and you just want to kind of talk about where you are, you know, send me a message.
Right. Information is free, guys. And there's so much out right now. Like, God bless the internet because we get to do things like this, but sometimes it's a little much and we need a little help and, you know, filtering. And there's nothing wrong, you know, with getting that. And again, you know, a free group on Facebook up to whatever you feel like needs to happen. Sometimes we don't know what it is that we need until we do something like join a group like Judy's, and then we have a better idea. And also we do that so that we don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, support is out there if you'd like it. And I just am so grateful for Judy for being able to, you know, I always say if any way that we can shorten the learning curve, because we certainly don't want it to be at the expense of our children. You know, thank you, Judy. So we'll put the links down below. We'll get it shared around. And please, like I said, thank you for the comments that were given.
And thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yay. Thank you, Judy. So, and same time, same place next week, guys. So thank you again. And again, we're just a Facebook message or an email, or probably maybe even a phone call if our phone numbers are where you can get a hold of us type thing away. So thank you again. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
And we'll get that information in the comments below so that you guys can know where to go. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.